Listen closely, because this moment is not ordinary. There was something you were just doing, scrolling, thinking, maybe even worrying about your future. Maybe you were wondering why nothing is working out the way you planned, why the applications go unanswered, why the opportunities slip through your fingers, why it feels like no matter how hard you try, something invisible keeps blocking your way. And right in the middle of all that, this message found you. Not by accident, not by coincidence, not by chance. This is a divine interruption. There are moments in life when heaven steps in, not gently, not subtly, but with urgency. Moments when God bypasses your plans, your logic, your expectations, and places a message directly in your path. This is one of those moments. You didn't stumble here. You were led here. And deep down, something in you already knows that. Have you ever felt like you're doing everything right but nothing is moving? You followed the rules. You studied hard. You applied for the jobs. You showed up on time. You stayed consistent. You did what everyone told you would guarantee success. And yet you're still waiting, still searching, still feeling like something is off. That feeling, that frustration, that quiet question in your spirit asking, why isn't this working for me? That is not failure. That is a signal. Because what if the reason things aren't working is because you're chasing something you were never meant to pursue in the first place? Pause and feel that. What if the closed doors were never rejection? What if the silence was not absence? What if the delay was actually protection? Because there is a truth most people never hear, and even fewer are willing to accept. God will not bless a path He never assigned to you. And that's where everything begins to shift. You see, while you've been running after jobs, opportunities, approvals, heaven has been watching. Not judging you, but waiting. Waiting for the moment when you finally stop chasing what the world told you to chase and start listening to what God hath been trying to show you. And here's the part that might shake you. You've already felt it. That inner resistance. The hesitation every time you try to force yourself into something that doesn't feel right. That quiet voice that whispers, this isn't it, even when everything on paper says it should be. You tried to ignore it. You tried to silence it. You told yourself, maybe I'm overthinking. But that voice never left, did it? Because that wasn't doubt. That was direction. God hath been trying to redirect you, but you've been too focused on chasing what looks safe, what looks stable, what looks acceptable to everyone else. And now, heaven is stepping in more boldly. Because time is moving. And you cannot afford to spend another season chasing something that was never meant for you. This is why this message feels different. This is why your attention locked in. This is why something inside you feels stirred, maybe even uncomfortable. Because this is not just information, this is activation. Right now, something is shifting in your spirit. Something is waking up. Something is beginning to question everything you thought you knew about success, work, and purpose. And that's exactly where God needs you. Not comfortable, not distracted, but aware. Because what you're about to hear next will challenge everything you've been taught. It will stretch your thinking. It will pull you out of the cycle you've been stuck in. But more importantly, it will show you what God actually wants you to do instead. And once you see it, you won't be able to unsee it. Type "I am ready for redirection" in the comments if you feel this shift in your spirit. Blessing code 1717 is now activated over your path. From the moment you became aware of the world around you, a script was handed to you. Not written on paper, not spoken all at once, but repeated over years through parents, teachers, society, and even well-meaning voices who believed they were guiding you in the right direction. Study hard. Find a stable job. Work consistently. Earn safely. Survive comfortably. That was the formula. That was the promise. That was the path everyone said would lead to security, respect, and fulfillment. And you believed it. Not because you were naive, but because it was all you were shown. You watched people wake up early, rush into routines, chase deadlines, and call it success. You saw exhaustion normalized and passion sacrificed in the name of stability. You were taught that struggle was part of the process, that dissatisfaction was normal, that fulfillment could wait until retirement. And somewhere along the way, without even realizing it, you accepted a system that trained you to chase jobs instead of discovering purpose. But now something inside you is beginning to question it. Because if that system truly worked, why do so many people feel empty even after achieving everything they were told to pursue? Why do people reach positions they once dreamed of only to feel disconnected, drained, and lost? Why does success, as the world defines it, often come with anxiety, burnout, and a constant feeling of there must be more than this? That question you feel rising within you right now, that quiet discomfort, that awareness that something doesn't add up, that is not confusion. That is awakening. Because the truth is, the world never trained you to live, and trained you to function. It trained you to fit into structures, not to stand in your uniqueness. It trained you to seek approval, not alignment. It trained you to exchange your time for survival, not to step into your calling. And the most subtle part of this illusion is that it doesn't feel like a trap until you start outgrowing it. And you have outgrown it. That is why chasing jobs feels heavier now. That is why forcing yourself into applications, interviews, and expectations feels unnatural. That is why even when opportunities appear, something inside you hesitates. Not because you are lazy, not because you are incapable, but because your spirit recognizes what your mind has not fully accepted yet. This path is not yours. You were never designed to spend your life chasing positions that confine your potential. You were never created to shrink your gifts to fit into roles that barely recognize them. And deep down you know this. You felt it in those quiet moments when you question your direction. You sensed it when you imagine a life that feels more meaningful, more aligned, more alive, even if you can't fully explain what that looks like yet. There is something in you that refuses to settle. Something that resists being boxed in. Something that keeps whispering, "This is not it." And the world tries to silence that voice and tells you to be realistic. It tells you to stop overthinking. It tells you to follow the safe path because that's just how life works. But what the world calls safe often comes at the cost of your soul's expression. And what the world calls realistic often ignores the divine design placed inside you. You were not created to follow a crowded path blindly. You were created to walk a path that requires awareness, trust, and alignment. And that is why the illusion is breaking for you now. Because once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Once you realize that chasing jobs was never the ultimate goal, everything begins to shift. Your perspective changes. Your priorities begin to realign. Your definition of success starts to evolve. And suddenly, what once felt necessary begins to feel optional. This is where most people get uncomfortable. Because breaking free from illusion requires courage. It requires you to question everything you were taught. It requires you to stand still when everyone else is rushing. It requires you to trust something deeper than logic, something spiritual. And this is exactly where God begins to work. Because before He can guide you into what you are meant to do, He must first break the belief that you are here to do what everyone else is doing. This is not confusion. This is separation. This is the moment where your path begins to diverge from the crowd. The moment where you stop chasing what the world values and start seeking what God designed specifically for you. And as this realization settles into your spirit, one thing becomes clear: if chasing jobs is not the answer, then what is? That answer is closer than you think. And in the next part, you will begin to see the difference between the system you were taught to follow and the system heaven actually operates in. Type "I release the illusion" in the comments if this truth is resonating with you. Blessing code 2222 is now aligning your vision. There is a system you were taught to trust, and then there is a system you were never taught to see. The system of the world is loud, structured, and visible. It tells you that your worth is tied to your output, that your security depends on your salary, that your future is built by climbing ladders designed by other people. It teaches you to measure your life in paychecks, promotions, and positions. And for a time, it convinces you that if you just keep pushing, keep striving, keep chasing, you will eventually arrive at a place of peace. But look closely. That peace rarely comes, because the system of the world is built on effort without alignment. It rewards motion, not meaning. It celebrates activity, not assignment. And the more you try to force your way through it without divine direction, the more resistance you feel. That resistance is not there to punish you, it is there to reveal that you are operating in the wrong system. Heaven does not function the way the world does. Heaven's economy is not built on hustle. It is built on alignment. In the world system, you chase opportunities. In heaven's system, opportunities are drawn to you when you are in position. In the world system, you prove your worth to receive. In heaven's system, you recognize your identity and provision follows. In the world system, you exhaust yourself trying to secure your future. In heaven's system, your future is already secured when you walk in obedience. This is the shift you are being called into. And this is why everything feels different now. Because you have been trying to operate in a system that was never designed for your calling. You have been measuring your progress using standards that do not apply to your assignment. And deep down, your spirit has been resisting it, even when your mind tried to accept it. There is a reason why certain doors close no matter how qualified you are. There is a reason why certain paths feel heavy no matter how promising they look. There is a reason why you feel disconnected even when you are doing everything right according to the world. It is because heaven is not responding to your effort, it is responding to your alignment. And alignment requires something most people avoid: stillness. You see, the world teaches you to keep moving at all costs. You keep applying, keep chasing, keep doing something, anything, just to avoid feeling stuck. But heaven often calls you to pause, to step back, to listen, to become aware of what is truly being asked of you beyond the noise. Because when you are aligned, you do not have to force what is meant for you. Provision begins to flow in ways you cannot fully explain. Doors open without manipulation. Connections appear without struggle. Ideas come with clarity. Your action becomes undeniable. And what once required constant effort begins to feel natural. This is not luck. This is divine order. But here is where many people miss it. They fear letting go of the world system because it feels tangible. It feels predictable. It feels safe. Even if it drains them, even if it limits them, even if it keeps them stuck, it feels familiar. And stepping into heaven's system requires trust. It requires surrender. It requires releasing the need to control every outcome. And that is uncomfortable. Because you have been conditioned to believe that if you are not chasing something, you are falling behind. But what if the opposite is true? What if constantly chasing is the very thing keeping you out of position? What if slowing down is not losing time but aligning with timing? Because heaven does not operate on urgency the way the world does. It operates on precision. Every step, every opportunity, every connection is orchestrated with intention. And when you are aligned with that rhythm, you begin to experience something the world cannot offer: peace with progress. Not rushed progress, not forced progress, but purposeful, steady, undeniable movement in the direction you were created to go. And as this truth settles into you, something begins to shift internally. You stop asking, "How can I get a job?" and start asking, "What am I being positioned for?" You stop chasing and start discerning. You stop forcing and start aligning. And that is where everything begins to change. Because once you step into heaven's economy, you no longer depend on limited systems to sustain you. You begin to tap into something higher, something intentional, something designed specifically for your life. And this leads to the next revelation. If provision follows alignment, then what exactly are you meant to align with? Type "I align with divine provision" in the comments if you are ready to step into this shift. Blessing code 3333 is now activating supernatural alignment over your life. As this truth settles into your spirit, understand this: every revelation you receive is not just for you. It is meant to become light for someone else who is still searching in the dark. When you sow into this mission, you are not supporting a message. You are releasing seeds into souls that are waiting for divine direction. The word says, "Give, and it shall be given unto you." And this is not distant scripture. This is God speaking into your moment right now, inviting you into a flow of supernatural exchange. I feel led to say this clearly: when I give, I become a vessel for God's work to reach others. This message about stepping out of the world system is not just revelation. It is a calling, and your response matters in this moment. There is urgency in obedience, because what you release today activates what heaven is preparing to release back into your life. As you give through Super Thanks or the PayPal link in the description or QR code, you are opening a channel for God's word to multiply across lives. Step into this act now, and let your giving become a prophetic declaration that you are aligned with God's purpose. There is something within you that has been quietly waiting, not for opportunity, not for permission, but for recognition. It has been there long before the job applications, long before the pressure to figure life out, long before the world told you who you should become. It was placed inside you before anyone ever spoke expectations over your life. And even now, beneath the noise, beneath the confusion, beneath the constant search, it is still there. Your assignment. Not a job. Not a role. Not something temporary that you step into and out of depending on circumstance. No, this is deeper than that. This is the reason you think the way you think, feel the way you feel, notice what others ignore, and carry a perspective that often sets you apart. You were not randomly designed. Every inclination, every curiosity, every natural pull you feel toward certain ideas, certain problems, certain ways of expressing yourself, none of it is accidental. It is all connected. It is all intentional. And it is all pointing toward something the world cannot define for you, but God already has. The problem is, you were taught to overlook it. Because your assignment does not always look practical at first. It does not always fit into a job description. It does not always come with immediate validation or income. And because of that, you were conditioned to dismiss it as unrealistic, as a hobby, as something secondary to real work. But what if what you've been calling unrealistic is actually your direction? What if the very thing you keep setting aside is the thing you were meant to build your life around? Think about it. There are certain thoughts you return to over and over again. certain ideas that excite you in a way nothing else does, certain ways of seeing the world that feel natural to you, but different from others. Even when you try to ignore them, they come back. Even when you push them aside, they resurface. Even when you convince yourself they are not important, they remain. That is not distraction. That is design. God does not place something within you repeatedly without purpose. He does not allow certain desires, visions, or insights to follow you through different seasons of your life unless they are connected to something you are meant to step into. And yet, because you've been focused on chasing jobs, you've been moving past these signals. You've been trying to fit into systems that require you to ignore what makes you different instead of building from what makes you unique. That is why it feels misaligned. That is why you feel like you are forcing yourself into something that never fully fits. Because your assignment is not something you squeeze into after everything else, it is something everything else is meant to flow from. And here is the truth that changes everything. Your assignment is not just about you. It is about impact. There is a problem you are meant to solve. There is a group of people you are meant to reach. There is a perspective you carry that is meant to bring clarity where there is confusion. There is something in you that answers something in someone else, and that connection is not random. That is how provision begins in heaven's system. Not through chasing, but through serving your assignment. Because when you step into what you were created to do, you begin to create value naturally. You begin to move with clarity. You begin to operate in a way that feels aligned instead of forced. And from that place, opportunities, resources, and provision begin to respond. But before any of that happens, there is a moment you must face. A moment of honesty. You have to ask yourself, what have I been ignoring? What have I been feeling pulled toward but keep setting aside because it does not look like the safe option? What keeps showing up in my thoughts, in my curiosity, in my quiet moments that I have not taken seriously? Because that is where your assignment begins to reveal itself. Not in noise, not in pressure, but in patterns. And once you begin to recognize those patterns, something shifts inside you. You stop looking outward for direction and start looking inward with awareness. You begin to trust that what God placed within you is not random, it is guidance. This is not about having everything figured out instantly. This is about acknowledging what has already been shown to you and choosing not to ignore it anymore. Because the moment you honor your assignment, even in a small way, you begin to step out of confusion and into clarity. You begin to move differently. You begin to think differently. You begin to see possibilities where you once saw limitations. And most importantly, you begin to align. And as that alignment begins, the next question naturally rises. If this is your assignment, why has it felt so difficult to fully step into it? Type "I accept my assignment" in the comments if you are ready to recognize what has been placed within you. Lesson code 4444 is now activating clarity over your purpose. There is a pattern in your life that you have noticed even if you have not fully understood it. Doors open just enough to give you hope and then they close. Opportunities appear promising and then they disappear. Situations seem like they are finally aligning and then something shifts. Something blocks it. Something delays it. And each time it happens, you are left asking the same question: why does this keep happening to me? At first, it feels like rejection. It feels personal. It feels like you are being overlooked. Like you are not good enough, like you are somehow missing something everyone else seems to have figured out. You begin to question yourself. You begin to doubt your path. You begin to wonder if you are falling behind. But what if everything you have labeled as rejection was never rejection at all? What if it was redirection? Because there is something you need to understand at a deeper level. God will not allow you to fully succeed in a path that is not aligned with your assignment. He may allow you to step toward it. He may allow you to explore it. He may even allow it to look like it is about to work, but at a certain point, if it is not meant for you, it will not hold. You will not sustain. It will not fully open. Not because you are unworthy, but because you are being protected. Think about it. There are doors you once wanted so badly, opportunities you prayed for, situations you tried to force, outcomes you thought would solve everything. And now, looking back, you can see clearly if those doors had stayed open, you would have been stuck in something that did not serve your growth, your peace, or your purpose. But in the moment, you could not see that. In the moment, it felt like loss. This is where trust becomes necessary, because redirection rarely feels comfortable. It rarely makes immediate sense. It often feels like delay, like confusion, like standing still while everyone else is moving forward. But what is actually happening beneath the surface is far more intentional than it appears. God is adjusting your path. He is removing you from environments that would limit you. He is closing doors that would distract you. He is preventing you from settling into something that looks good on the outside but would slowly disconnect you from your assignment. And because you cannot always see the full picture, it feels like something is being taken from you when in reality, something is being preserved for you. This is why the same patterns repeat. Because until you stop trying to force what is not aligned, the resistance will continue. You will keep encountering closed doors. You will keep experiencing delays. You will keep feeling like you are almost there but not quite. Not as punishment, but as guidance. Because God is not responding to your effort alone, He is responding to your direction. And if your direction is slightly off, even if your effort is strong, the outcome will not fully manifest. That is why some people can work endlessly and still feel stuck, while others step into alignment and experience movement that seems almost effortless. It is not about who is trying harder. It is about who is moving in the right direction. And right now, your direction is being corrected. Every closed door is a signal. Every delay is an adjustment. Every unexpected shift is a form of communication. But the question is, are you interpreting it correctly? Or are you still seeing it as rejection? Because the way you interpret these moments determines how you respond to them. If you see rejection, you will try harder, push more, force more, exhaust yourself trying to prove something that does not need to be proven. But if you see redirection, you will pause. You will observe. You will begin to ask different questions. Not why is this not working, but what is this trying to show me? And that question changes everything, because it opens you up to awareness. It allows you to step back from the frustration and begin to recognize patterns. It allows you to see where you have been trying to fit into spaces that were never meant to hold you. It allows you to acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, there is another path that has been quietly waiting for your attention. And this is where clarity begins. Not when everything suddenly makes sense, but when you stop resisting what is happening and start listening to it. Because once you shift your perspective, those closed doors no longer feel like loss. They begin to feel like protection. They begin to feel like precision. They begin to feel like part of a larger plan that you are only just starting to understand. And as that understanding grows, something within you begins to settle. The urgency fades. The pressure decreases. The need to chase every opportunity disappears. Because you begin to realize what is meant for you does not require you to force your way into it. It requires you to align with it. And that leads to the next realization: if God has been redirecting you this entire time, then how exactly has He been trying to speak to you? Type "I trust the redirection" in the comments if you are ready to see closed doors differently. Blessing code 5555 is now guiding your path with divine precision. There is something you need to hear clearly, and not just hear it, but recognize it. God has already been speaking to you. Not once, not twice, but repeatedly in ways you may not have fully acknowledged at the time, because you were expecting a loud answer, a clear sign, and direct instruction that leaves no room for doubt. But instead, what you received was subtle, quiet, easy to overlook, easy to dismiss. And because it did not match your expectations, you ignored it. But that does not mean it was not real. Because God rarely speaks in noise. He speaks in patterns. He speaks through thoughts that feel different from your usual thinking. He speaks through ideas that arrive without effort but carry clarity. He speaks through moments where something suddenly feels right or deeply wrong, even if you cannot logically explain why. He speaks through a sense of knowing that does not need external validation. And if you are honest with yourself, you have felt this many times. There were moments when you were about to make a decision, and something inside you hesitated. Not fear, not doubt, but a quiet pause. A subtle resistance. A feeling that said, wait. And instead of listening, you pushed through it because you thought you needed to act quickly. There were moments when an idea came to you, something different, something unconventional, something that did not follow the usual path. And for a brief second, it felt exciting. It felt right, but then logic stepped in. Overthinking stepped in. And you convinced yourself it was not practical. There were moments when you felt drawn toward something not because it made sense on paper, but because it felt aligned. And yet, you ignored that pull because it did not match what you were taught to pursue. That was not confusion. That was communication. Because God does not always speak in ways that demand attention. Sometimes He speaks in ways that require awareness. And awareness is what you are being called into now. You see, the reason you feel stuck is not because you have no direction, it is because you have been overlooking the direction already given. You have been waiting for confirmation outside of yourself, while ignoring the confirmation already placed within you. And this is where everything begins to shift. Because the moment you start recognizing how God speaks to you, you stop searching aimlessly. You stop second-guessing every step. You stop relying solely on external validation. And you begin to trust something deeper. But here is where it becomes challenging. Because trusting that voice requires you to move differently. It requires you to act on what feels aligned even when it does not make immediate sense to others. It requires you to follow direction that may not come with guarantees. It requires you to step away from what is familiar and lean into what is being revealed to you internally. And that is uncomfortable, because you have been conditioned to rely on certainty, to follow clear structures, to move only when everything is explained. But divine direction does not always come with full explanation. It comes with clarity in the moment and trust for what comes next. That is why you have been hesitating. Not because you do not hear the voice, but because you are unsure if you should trust it. And this is where you must become honest with yourself. Ask yourself, how many times have I ignored what I felt was right only to later realize that I should have listened? How many times have I forced decisions that did not feel aligned and then experienced resistance afterward? How many times has that quiet inner voice been correct even when I doubted it? Because those moments are not random. They are evidence. Evidence that you are being guided even when you are not fully aware of it. And now, the invitation is clear. Stop ignoring it. Stop dismissing it. Stop overcomplicating it. Because the more you acknowledge that voice, the stronger it becomes. The clearer it becomes. The more consistent it becomes. And eventually, it becomes something you trust without hesitation. This is how alignment deepens. Not through chasing more auctions, but through listening more closely. Not through forcing movement, but through responding to guidance. And as you begin to do this, something changes in the way you move through life. Decisions become easier. Direction becomes clearer. And the constant feeling of being lost begins to fade, because you are no longer disconnected from guidance. You are walking with it. And that leads to the next shift. You must understand, if God has already been speaking to you, then what happens when you finally stop ignoring His voice and start following it fully? Type "I listen" and trust in the comments if you are ready to follow the voice within. Blessing code 6666 is now strengthening your discernment. There's a way of living that you have been taught, and there is a way of living you are now being called into. For most of your life, you have been operating in hustle mode. Constant movement, constant effort, constant pressure to do more, be more, achieve more. You were told that success belongs to those who push the hardest, who work the longest, who sacrifice the most. And so you learned to keep going, even when you felt tired, even when you felt uncertain, even when something inside you was quietly asking you to slow down. Hustle became your default. It became the way you measured progress. If you were busy, you felt productive. If you were chasing something, you felt like you were moving forward. And if you were still, if you paused, if you stepped back, it felt like you were falling behind. But now, something inside you is beginning to resist that way of living. Because no matter how much you hustle, it never feels like enough. There is always more to do, more to chase, more to prove. And instead of feeling fulfilled, you feel drained. Instead of feeling aligned, you feel scattered. Instead of feeling certain, you feel like you are constantly trying to catch up to something that keeps moving further away. That is the limitation of hustle. It keeps you in motion, but not necessarily in the right direction. And this is where the shift begins. Because alignment does not look like hustle. Alignment looks like clarity. It looks like knowing what to do, and just as importantly, knowing what not to do. It looks like focusing your energy on what truly matters instead of spreading yourself across everything that seems like an opportunity. It looks like moving with intention instead of reacting out of pressure. And this shift is not about doing less for the sake of comfort. It is about doing what is right for your path. When you are in hustle mode, you say yes to everything because you are afraid of missing out. You chase every possibility because you are unsure which one will work. You keep yourself busy because stillness feels uncomfortable. But when you move into alignment, your decisions change. You become selective. You begin to recognize that not every opportunity is meant for you. Not every path is yours to walk. Not every door that opens is meant to be entered. And instead of chasing everything, you begin to discern what actually belongs to your journey. This is where your energy shifts. Because instead of being scattered across multiple directions, you become focused. You become intentional. You begin to invest your time and effort into what is truly aligned with your assignment. And something remarkable happens when you do this. What once felt difficult begins to feel natural. What once required constant effort begins to flow more easily. What once felt confusing begins to make sense. This is not because life suddenly becomes effortless, but because you are no longer working against your own direction. You are moving with it. And this is what most people misunderstand. They think alignment means everything will be easy, that there will be no challenges, no uncertainty. But alignment is not the absence of difficulty, it is the presence of clarity within it. You still take action. You still put in effort. But that effort is no longer forced. It is guided. It is intentional. It is connected to something deeper than just survival. And this is where peace begins to replace pressure. Because you are no longer trying to prove yourself through constant motion. You are no longer measuring your worth by how much you can do. You are no longer exhausting yourself trying to fit into systems that were never designed for you. You are moving with purpose. And purpose changes everything. And changes how you approach your time. It changes how you make decisions. It changes how you respond to opportunities. Because instead of asking, will this make me money? Or will this make me look successful? You begin to ask, is this aligned with what I am meant to do? And that question filters everything. It removes distractions. It removes unnecessary pressure. It removes the constant need to chase. Because when you are aligned, you are not trying to become something you are not. You are stepping into what you already are. And that is why this shift is so powerful. Because once you experience alignment, even in small ways, you cannot go back to living in constant hustle. You begin to recognize the difference. You begin to feel when something is off. You begin to notice when you are forcing something that does not belong. And instead of pushing through it, you pause. You realign. You adjust your direction. Because you understand now progress is not about how fast you move. It is about how aligned your movement is. And as this shift becomes more real to you, a new question begins to form. If alignment changes everything, then how does it actually attract the right opportunities into your life without forcing them? Type I choose alignment over hustle in the comments if you are ready to move with purpose. Blessing code 7777 is now activating focused direction in your life. There is something happening around you right now that you may not have fully understood before, but you have felt it. Certain opportunities seem to appear at the right time. Certain people enter your life and shift your direction. Certain ideas come to you that feel perfectly aligned with what you need in that moment. And at the same time, there are moments when nothing seems to move, nothing connects, nothing flows no matter how hard you try. This is not random. This is response. Because there is a law at work in your life that goes beyond effort, beyond strategy, beyond what the world teaches you about chasing success. It is a spiritual law, and it operates whether you are aware of it or not. You do not attract what you chase. You attract what you carry. And this is where everything begins to change. Because for so long, you believed that if you just worked harder, tried more, pushed further, you would eventually reach what you were looking for. But what you are beginning to realize now is that effort alone does not determine outcome. Your state does. Your alignment does. Your identity does. Because what you carry internally, your clarity, your focus, your sense of purpose, your belief in your direction, it creates a signal. And that signal influences what comes toward you, what stays with you, and what passes you by. When you are scattered, uncertain, and chasing everything, you send out confusion. And confusion attracts more confusion. You find yourself in situations that do not align, dealing with opportunities that feel off, connecting with people who do not truly support your direction. But when you are clear, when you are aligned, when you begin to understand who you are and what you are meant to do, everything shifts. Because clarity attracts clarity. Purpose attracts provision. Alignment attracts opportunity. This is why some people seem to move forward without forcing things. It is not because they are lucky. It is because they are carrying something different internally. They are not chasing everything, they are embodying something specific. And that embodiment draws the right situations into their path. This is what you are stepping into now. A shift from chasing to becoming. Because the moment you stop trying to get everything from the outside and start building clarity on the inside, your entire experience begins to change. You begin to notice that the right ideas come to you without struggle. The right people appear without force. The right opportunities begin to form without you having to chase them endlessly. This is not passivity. This is alignment in action. And it requires something important from you. Consistency in what you carry. Because you cannot expect aligned opportunities while holding on to confusion. You cannot expect clarity externally while doubting yourself internally. You cannot expect provision while still operating from fear. This is why your inner state matters. Because it is not just influencing how you feel, it is influencing what you experience. And this is where responsibility comes in. Not pressure, but awareness. Because once you understand this, you stop blaming circumstances. You stop thinking everything is happening randomly. You begin to recognize that your internal alignment is directly connected to your external reality. And this is empowering. Because it means you are not waiting for something outside of you to change before your life moves forward. It means you have the ability to shift your direction by shifting what you carry within you. You begin to focus on clarity instead of chaos. You begin to strengthen your sense of purpose instead of questioning it constantly. You begin to trust your direction instead of second-guessing every step. And as you do this, something powerful begins to happen. The need to chase fades. Because you realize that what is meant for you is not something you have to run after endlessly. It is something that responds to who you are becoming. And that realization brings a different kind of confidence. Not the kind built on external validation, but the kind that comes from knowing you are aligned. And when you are aligned, you move differently. You speak differently. You decide differently. And life responds differently. But there is still something that tries to pull you back. Even as you begin to understand this, even as you feel the shift happening, there is a part of you that hesitates. A part of you that feels uncertain. A part of you that wonders if you should go back to what feels familiar even if it no longer feels right. And that brings us to the next barrier you must face. If alignment attracts everything you need, then why do you still feel the urge to return to old patterns? Type "I attract through alignment" in the comments if you are ready to embody this truth. Blessing code 8888 is now activating magnetic clarity in your life. As this revelation settles into your spirit, understand this sacred truth: when you align, you become a vessel through which light reaches others who are still searching for direction. Every seed you release into this mission becomes a river that carries God's word into places your voice alone cannot reach. The Lord declares, "Give, and it shall be given unto you." And this is not distant scripture. This is a living invitation spoken into your moment right now. I feel this strongly. When I give, I activate a flow that blesses both others and myself. This message about alignment is not just knowledge, it is transformation. And your action right now determines how far that transformation spreads. Do not delay what your spirit is prompting you to do, because obedience in this moment carries divine multiplication. As you give through super thanks with the PayPal link in the description or QR code, you are stepping into a prophetic act that opens doors not only for others, but for your own life. Release your seed now, and watch how heaven responds. There is a moment that happens right after clarity, and most people do not recognize it for what it is. You begin to understand something deeper. You start to see that chasing jobs is not your path. You feel the shift toward alignment. You sense that something different is being asked of you. And for a brief moment everything feels clear. But then something else rises. Fear. Not loud, not obvious, but subtle, persistent, and convincing. It sounds like logic. It feels like caution. It presents itself as responsibility. And before you realize it, it begins to pull you back toward what is familiar, even if that familiarity has already been draining you. This is the barrier you are facing right now. Because stepping into alignment is not just about clarity, it is about courage. And fear is what tries to interrupt that transition. You see, your mind has been trained for years to associate safety with certainty. A job looks certain. A fixed path looks predictable. A routine looks stable. And even if those things do not fulfill you, they give you something your mind has learned to depend on: control. Alignment, on the other hand, does not always give you immediate control. It requires trust. It requires you to move forward without having every detail figured out. It requires you to follow direction that may not come with guarantees. It requires you to release what feels secure for something that feels true. And that is where fear begins to speak the loudest. It tells you, what if this does not work? It asks, what if you make the wrong decision? It reminds you, at least the old way is safe. And slowly, without realizing it, you begin to step backward. Not because you want to, but because fear makes the past feel more reliable than the unknown. This is why you keep returning to old patterns. Not because they are right for you, but because they are familiar to you. And familiarity has power until you become aware of it. Because once you recognize that fear is what is pulling you back, everything begins to shift. You stop seeing your hesitation as logic and start seeing it as resistance. You stop interpreting your doubts as truth and start questioning where they are coming from. You begin to notice that every time you get close to stepping into something aligned, fear increases. The questions become louder. The uncertainty becomes stronger. The urge to go back becomes more intense. That is not coincidence. That is transition. Because fear does not appear when you are staying the same. It appears when you are about to change. And this is where you must make a decision. Not a comfortable decision, but a necessary one. You must decide whether you will continue choosing what feels safe or begin choosing what is aligned. Because the truth is, staying in old patterns will always feel easier in the moment. It will always feel like the safer option. But over time, it leads to the same place: frustration, stagnation, and the constant feeling that something is missing. Alignment, on the other hand, may feel uncertain at first. It may require you to move differently, think differently, and trust differently. But it leads somewhere else entirely: clarity, purpose, and a sense of direction that does not fade. And you already know this. You have felt the difference. You have experienced moments where you followed what felt right and everything began to flow differently. And you have also experienced moments where you ignored that feeling and ended up back in the same cycle. That contrast is not accidental. It is confirmation. And now, the awareness is here. You can no longer say you do not know why you keep going back. You can see it. You can feel it. You can recognize that fear had been the barrier, not lack of ability, not lack of opportunity, not lack of direction. And once you see that clearly, something powerful happens. Fear loses its control. Not because it disappears completely, but because you no longer follow it blindly. You begin to move forward even when it is present. You begin to take steps even when certainty is not fully there. You begin to trust alignment more than you trust fear. And that is where transformation begins. Because the moment you stop letting fear decide your direction, you take your power back. You step out of reaction and into intention. You stop repeating the past and start creating something new. And as you stand at this point, with awareness of both paths in front of you, a final question begins to rise. If fear has been holding you back, then what exactly is God calling you to step into instead? Type "I move past fear" in the comments if you are ready to break old patterns. Blessing code 9999 is now strengthening your courage to move forward. Now you arrive at the moment where everything becomes real. not just understood but activated. Because it is one thing to recognize that chasing jobs is not your path. It is another thing entirely to step into what God is actually calling you to do instead. And this is where many people hesitate, not because they lack clarity, but because they are waiting for something external to confirm what has already been placed within them. But hear this clearly, you are not waiting for your calling to appear. You are being called to act on what has already been revealed. Because your assignment does not begin when everything is perfectly planned. It begins the moment you choose to take it seriously. And this is what God is asking of you now. To shift from passive awareness into intentional action. Not rush action. Not force action. But aligned, deliberate movement in the direction that has been quietly shown to you again and again. That idea you keep returning to that is not random. That direction that keeps pulling your attention that is not distraction. That way of thinking, creating, solving, or expressing that feels natural to you that is not something to ignore. That is your starting point. And the mistake most people make is waiting for it to look like a complete plan before they begin. They want guarantees. They want certainty. They want to know exactly how it will work before they take the first step. But that is not how divine direction unfolds. It reveals itself through movement, step by step, decision by decision, alignment by alignment. God does not give you the entire path at once. He gives you enough to begin. And what you do with the beginning determines everything that follows. Because when you act on what you already know, even in a small way, something begins to shift. Your clarity increases. Your confidence grows. Your direction becomes more defined. And what once felt uncertain begins to take shape. This is the activation. It is not about doing everything at once. It is about doing something consistently. It is about taking what hath been placed within you and giving it attention, giving it time, giving it effort, even when it does not immediately produce results. Even when it does not look impressive to others. Even when it feels like you are stepping into the unknown. Because what you are building is not just an outcome, it is alignment in motion. And alignment requires commitment. You cannot treat your assignment like an option and expect it to transform your life. You cannot give it occasional attention and expect it to grow. You cannot keep returning to old patterns and expect something new to emerge. There has to be a decision, a clear, internal decision that says this matters. Not later, not when it feels easier, not when everything else is settled. Now, because the longer you delay acting on what you already know, the more disconnected you feel, the more doubt creeps in, the more you question something that was once clear. But the moment you begin, even in a small way, that disconnection starts to fade. You feel engaged again. You feel focused again. You feel like you are moving with intention instead of drifting. And that feeling is important. Because it is confirmation. Confirmation that you are no longer just thinking about alignment, you are living it. And here is what you need to understand moving forward. This path will not always feel easy. There will be moments of uncertainty, moments where you question your progress, moments where results take time. But those moments are not signs that you are on the wrong path. They are part of building something real. Because unlike chasing jobs, which often gives immediate structure, stepping into your assignment requires you to create structure. It requires discipline. It requires consistency. It requires you to show up even when motivation is not strong. And that is where transformation happens. Because as you continue to act on what hath been placed within you, something begins to solidify. Your direction becomes clearer. Your work becomes stronger. Your presence becomes more defined. And eventually what you are building begins to respond. Opportunities begin to connect. People begin to notice. Prevasion begins to form. Not because you chased it, but because you aligned with it. And this is the shift you have been waiting for. Not a sudden breakthrough out of nowhere, but a gradual, undeniable movement that comes from consistent alignment. And now, as you stand at this point, one final realization begins to form. If you have been called to act, then what happens if you choose to ignore this? Type "I take aligned action" in the comments if you are ready to begin. Blessing code 1010 is now activating movement in your life. There is a moment in every person's life where clarity arrives, not partially, not vaguely, but directly. And this is that moment for you. Because everything you have heard so far is not just insight, it is instruction. It is not just meant to make you think differently, it is meant to make you move differently. And now that you are aware, now that you can see the patterns, now that you understand what has been happening, there is a responsibility that comes with it. Because once you see truth, you cannot go back to living as if you do not know. But many people try. They feel the shift. They recognize the misalignment. They understand that they are being called in a different direction. And yet they hesitate. They delay. They return to what is familiar, telling themselves they will figure it out later. And that is where the real danger begins. Not in failure, but in ignoring what has already been revealed. Because when you ignore alignment, you do not stay neutral. You drift. You drift back into the same cycles, the same patterns, the same frustrations that you have already experienced. And the difference this time is it feels heavier. Because now you know there is another way. That is what makes it difficult. It is not just that things are not working, it is that you are aware they are not working, and you are choosing to stay anyway. That creates tension. Internal tension. A constant feeling of knowing you should be moving differently but not acting on it. A quiet frustration that builds over time. A sense that you are out of sync with yourself even if everything on the outside looks normal. And over time, that tension turns into something deeper. It turns into stagnation. Because when you ignore direction, movement slows. Not always immediately. Not always obviously, but gradually, subtly, consistently. You find yourself putting energy into things that do not grow. You find yourself repeating efforts that do not lead anywhere new. You find yourself feeling busy but not progressing. And that is not coincidence. That is misalignment being sustained. Because God does not force you into your assignment. He reveals it and then allows you to choose. And if you choose to ignore it, He will not remove your ability to act, but He will allow you to experience the outcome of staying in a path that is not meant for you. And that outcome is always the same. Limited growth. Repeated cycle. And a constant sense that something is missing no matter how much you try to fill it with other things. This is the warning. Not to create fear, but to create awareness. Because the cost of ignoring alignment is not immediate failure. It is delayed purpose. It is years spent moving in directions that do not fully reflect who you are meant to be. It is energy invested into paths that do not return what they promise. It is waking up one day and realizing that you have been active but not aligned. And that realization is heavier than any temporary uncertainty you may feel right now. Because uncertainty can be navigated, but regret stays. And this is why this moment matters. Because you are not at the beginning of your awareness anymore. You have seen the patterns. You have felt the resistance. You have recognized the misalignment. You understand that chasing jobs is not your path and that something else has been placed within you. And now, the choice is in front of you. Not later. Not eventually. Now. Because the longer you delay, the easier it becomes to fall back into old habits. the easier it becomes to silence what you have felt. The easier it becomes to convince yourself that staying where you are is acceptable. But deep down you will always know. You will always feel that something more was available to you. And that feeling does not go away. It follows you. It stays with you. Until you either act on it or spend your time trying to ignore it. And that is not the life you are meant to live. You are not meant to carry awareness without action. You are not meant to recognize your assignment and then avoid it. You are not meant to settle into something that does not reflect what hath been revealed to you. This is your moment to decide. To either continue repeating what you already know does not work or to step into what is being shown to you, even if it requires courage. Because the path in front of you is clear now. One leads back to what is familiar but limiting. The other leads forward into what is aligned but requires trust. And you cannot walk both. Type "I choose alignment" now in the comments if you are ready to move forward without delay. Blessing code 1111 is now sealing your decision with clarity and strength. Now listen carefully, because this is where everything shifts from warning into promise. There is something waiting for you on the other side of alignment. Not something distant. Not something uncertain. Something real. Something already prepared. Something that has been delayed, not denied. Because God does not reveal direction without preparing provision. He does not call you into alignment without already establishing what will sustain you within it. And this is what you need to understand right now. You are not stepping into emptiness. You are stepping into what hath been waiting for you all along. But it only meets you when you move. There is a version of your life that exists beyond the confusion you have been living in. A version where your actions feel connected, where your effort produces results, where your direction feels clear instead of scattered. A version where you are no longer chasing but building, no longer guessing but knowing. And that version of your life is not created randomly. It is revealed through obedience. Because when you choose alignment, something begins to unlock. Not all at once but consistently. You begin to see progress where there was once delay. You begin to experience movement where there was once stagnation. You begin to feel peace where there was once pressure. And it does not come from doing more. It comes from doing what is right for you. This is the promise. That your life begins to reflect your alignment. That your effort begins to produce meaningful results. That your time begins to feel purposeful instead of wasted. That your path begins to unfold with clarity instead of confusion. And more than anything, that you begin to trust yourself again. Because for so long, you have doubted your direction. You have questioned your instincts. You have looked outside of yourself for answers that were already within you. But when you step into alignment, that changes. You begin to recognize your own clarity. You begin to move with confidence, not because everything is guaranteed, but because you know you are walking in the right direction. And that confidence creates something powerful. Consistency. You stop starting and stopping. You stop second-guessing every step. You stop abandoning what you begin. Because you are no longer acting out of pressure, you are acting out of purpose. And purpose sustains you in a way nothing else can. This is where provision begins to meet you. Not because you demanded it, but because you align with it. Opportunities begin to connect naturally. People who understand your direction begin to appear. Resources begin to show up at the right time. And what once felt impossible begins to feel achievable. Not instantly, but steadily. And that steady progress is what builds something real. Something that lasts. Something that grows. Something that reflects who you are, not what the world expected you to be. This is what awaits you. Not a perfect life, but an aligned one. A life where your energy is not wasted, A life where your direction is not forced. A life where your work feels connected to something deeper than survival. And once you experience that, you will never want to return to the way things were before. Because you will understand that everything you went through, every closed door, every delay, every moment of confusion was leading you here. To this awareness. To this decision. To this moment. And now the path is in front of you. Clear. Defined. Waiting. All that remains is your choice. Will you step into what hath been prepared for you, or will you return to what you already know is not meant for you? Because the promise is real, but it only becomes your reality when you act on it. Type "I walk in my purpose" in the comments if you are ready to step fully into alignment. Blessing code 1212 is now sealing your path with divine provision and clarity. As this message comes to completion, understand this: what has been revealed to you is not just for your life. It is meant to reach others who are still trapped in confusion, still chasing what was never meant for them. Every seed you release into this mission becomes a harvest of clarity in someone else's life, a light breaking through their darkness, a path opening where there was none. God declares, "Give, and it shall be given unto you." And this is not a distant promise. This is a living command over your life right now. I feel this deeply. When I give, I become a vessel for God to move through me and reach souls I may never meet. This moment is not casual. It is prophetic, and your response carries weight in the spirit. Do not delay this prompting, because obedience now unlocks what heaven had been preparing for you. As you give through Super Thanks with a PayPal link in the description or QR code, you are activating a divine exchange that multiplies beyond what you can see. Step forward now, and let your giving become part of God's greater work.